What happens when Meghan Markle walks onto a live television set expecting a polished conversation, only to realize that Ripa has no intention of letting the difficult questions slide? The cameras are already rolling. The studio lights are blazing overhead, the audience is buzzing with anticipation, and everything appears perfectly controlled. Kelly sits behind the desk with her familiar television smile, calm and composed, while Meghan takes her seat opposite her. For a few seconds, the atmosphere feels warm, almost effortless. But underneath the smiles, there is a strange tension in the room. Something about the way Kelly studies her guests suggests that this interview may not follow the usual script. Meghan adjusts herself in the chair and gives a small smile toward the audience. She looks polished, confident, and prepared. Her hands rest neatly together, but one thumb moves slowly across the other, an almost invisible gesture that suggests she is thinking carefully about what comes next. Kelly notices it. She doesn't react. Instead, she turns toward the audience, laughs lightly, and introduces Meghan with the kind of effortless energy that makes a live television audience immediately settle into the moment. The applause rises. Meghan smiles. The cameras move closer. For the first few minutes, everything goes exactly as expected. Kelly asks about public life, family, work, and the constant attention surrounding Meghan. Meghan responds with carefully measured answers, occasionally laughing, occasionally turning serious. The audience reacts politely, and the atmosphere remains relaxed. Then Kelly changes direction. She looks down at her cards. There is a pause. Not a long one. Just long enough for Meghan to notice. Kelly slowly lifts her eyes. There is something I think a lot of people have wondered about. Meghan's smile remains, but it becomes slightly tighter. Kelly continues. Do you think people misunderstand you, or do you think sometimes they simply don't believe the version of events they're hearing? The audience goes quiet. Meghan blinks. For the first time since sitting down, she doesn't immediately answer. Kelly doesn't rescue her. She waits. The silence stretches across the studio. Meghan finally gives a small laugh, but it sounds different from the laughter moments earlier. I think people believe what they're given, she says. Kelly tilts her head. And who decides what they're given? Another pause. The audience begins to murmur. Meghan looks toward Kelly, studying her expression. Kelly remains perfectly calm, her hands resting on the desk. There is no raised voice, no visible anger, no dramatic gesture. Somehow, that makes the moment even more uncomfortable. Meghan leans slightly forward. I think that's a complicated question. Kelly smiles. Most important questions are. A few audience members laugh nervously. Meghan doesn't. She slowly sits back. The temperature inside the studio suddenly seems different. The bright lights are still shining, the cameras are still moving, and the broadcast is still completely live, but the friendly atmosphere from minutes earlier has disappeared. Kelly turns another card. Meghan notices. What else is on that list, she asks. Kelly looks up. Quite a lot, actually. The audience reacts. Meghan's eyebrows lift. Kelly continues, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'd rather let you explain. Meghan takes a breath. I've spent years explaining. Her voice is quieter now. Kelly nods. Then perhaps that's why people are still asking. The reaction is immediate. A few audience members gasp. Someone in the crowd whispers, wow. Meghan's expression changes. Only slightly. Her jaw tightens. Her eyes remain fixed on Kelly. For several seconds, neither woman speaks. Then Meghan leans toward the microphone. I came here to have a conversation. Kelly answers just as calmly. So did I. The audience falls silent again. And then Meghan says something that makes Kelly stop smiling. I just didn't realize you had already decided what the conversation was going to be. Kelly slowly places her cards on the desk. The studio becomes completely still. She looks directly at Meghan. "No," Kelly says quietly. "I haven't decided anything." A beat. "I've just heard the questions people have been asking." Meghan's eyes narrow slightly. Kelly continues. "And there is one question I haven't asked yet." The camera cuts to Meghan's face. Her expression is now completely serious. Kelly leans forward. "This one is about what happened when the cameras weren't rolling." Meghan doesn't answer. Kelly waits. The audience waits. And then Meghan's eyes briefly move toward the producer behind the cameras. For the first time that evening, it looks as though she may actually be reconsidering whether she wants this conversation to continue. But the cameras are still rolling. And Kelly has just reached the question that could change the entire interview. The studio remains completely silent. Kelly Ripa's final question hangs in the air, and for several seconds Meghan Markle doesn't move. The bright lights reflect across the polished desk, the cameras remain locked on her face, and somewhere behind the set, a producer watches the monitor without blinking. Meghan slowly inhales, then exhales through her nose. Her expression is controlled, but the small movement of her hand against the chair reveals that the pressure is beginning to show. "What happened when the cameras weren't rolling?" Kelly repeats. Meghan looks directly at her. "I think you're assuming something happened." Kelly's expression barely changes. "I'm asking you." Meghan gives a restrained smile. "And I'm answering." A few audience members exchange uncomfortable glances. Kelly pauses, then reaches for her water glass. She takes a small sip before placing it carefully back on the table. "Fair enough," she says. "Then let's talk about what you remember." That answer catches Meghan off guard. Kelly continues, explaining that public conversations often become complicated when different people remember the same moment differently. She doesn't accuse Meghan of anything. Instead, she asks about the growing distance between public expectations and private reality. Meghan listens without interrupting. Then Kelly asks a sharper question. "Do you ever think the public has been given too many different explanations?" The audience reacts. Again. Meghan's smile disappears. "I think the public has been given a lot of opinions. But explanations?" Meghan looks down briefly. "That depends on who you believe." Kelly nods slowly. "And that's exactly the problem, isn't it?" The atmosphere changes again. Meghan sits straighter. "I don't think it's a problem." Kelly raises an eyebrow. "No. No, a beat. I think people sometimes want a simple story because a simple story is easier to understand." Kelly leans back. "And sometimes," she replies, "the truth isn't simple." The words are delivered softly, but they land with surprising force. Meghan looks toward the audience, then back at Kelly. "You seem very confident about what the truth is." Kelly immediately responds. "No. I'm confident that asking questions isn't the same thing as knowing the answer." For the first time, Meghan's expression softens slightly. But the tension doesn't disappear. Instead, it moves somewhere deeper. Kelly picks up another card. Meghan notices. "Is there more?" Kelly looks at the card. "Yes." A nervous laugh travels through the audience. Meghan shakes her head slightly. "You really came prepared." Kelly smiles. "It's television." That earns a few laughs, but Meghan remains serious. Then Kelly asks about the moments when public criticism became personal. She asks whether Meghan ever regretted responding to certain controversies, whether some statements could have been handled differently, and whether constant attempts to correct the public narrative sometimes made the story even bigger. Meghan listens carefully. When Kelly finishes, there is a long pause. "I've learned," Meghan says slowly, "that you can explain yourself perfectly and people can still hear something completely different." Kelly nods. "That must be exhausting." "It is. For one brief moment, the confrontation disappears. Meghan's voice becomes softer. Her expression reveals something more human beneath the polished public image. But Kelly isn't finished. And if you could go back? Meghan looks at her. To what? To the beginning. Meghan's eyes remain fixed on Kelly. I would protect my peace. The audience becomes quiet. Kelly waits. Meghan continues. I would stop trying to convince everyone. Another pause. And I would stop believing that every misunderstanding has to be corrected. Kelly slowly nods. Then she asks the question that changes everything. But would you change what you said? Meghan freezes. The room seems to shrink around them. She doesn't answer. Kelly waits. 5 seconds. 10. Finally Meghan speaks. That's a different question. Kelly's eyes remain on her. Why? Meghan looks toward the camera. Because some things were said for a reason. The audience erupts into whispers. Kelly leans forward. What reason? Meghan hesitates. Her expression changes completely. And then she says quietly, because there are things people still don't know. Kelly stops. The audience goes silent. What things? Meghan looks at Kelly. For a moment, it seems as though she might finally reveal the hidden story behind everything. But instead, she takes a breath and says, not everything belongs on live television. The cameras remain fixed on her. Kelly slowly lowers her cards. And then, with a serious expression, she delivers one final sentence before the commercial break. Then perhaps that's exactly what we should be talking about. The screen cuts away. But the real confrontation is only beginning. When the cameras return, the atmosphere has changed completely. The audience is quieter now. There is none of the easy laughter from the opening minutes, no relaxed conversation, no casual smiles. The studio lights seem harsher, revealing every small movement and every change in expression. Meghan sits perfectly still, while Kelly looks down at her notes one final time. Neither woman speaks. Then Kelly sets the papers aside. No more cards, she says. The audience reacts softly. Meghan looks at her. Kelly continues, just one conversation. Meghan nods. Kelly asks what she thinks people misunderstand most about her. This time, Meghan doesn't answer immediately. She looks toward the audience. Then toward the camera. And finally back at Kelly. That I'm not a person behind the headlines. The room becomes silent. Meghan's voice begins to soften. People see the headlines, the photographs, the interviews, the arguments. They see a version of me that exists in public. But they don't see every conversation that happened before the camera turned on. They don't see every night someone questioned whether speaking was worth the consequences. Kelly listens carefully. Meghan continues. Sometimes you become so used to defending yourself that you forget what it feels like to simply be yourself. The audience is visibly moved. Kelly doesn't interrupt. Meghan's eyes briefly glisten, but she maintains her composure. I've made mistakes, she says. Of course I have. Everyone has. But I don't think mistakes should become a permanent sentence. Kelly nods slowly. No, she says. They shouldn't. For the first time all evening, there is no confrontation in Kelly's voice. Only understanding. Then Kelly asks one final question. If you could say something to the people who have judged you without ever knowing you, what would you say? Meghan takes a long breath. I would say, you don't have to believe everything I say. The audience remains completely silent. But I hope you remember that there is a human being behind the story. The words settle over the studio. Kelly looks down for a moment before looking back up. That, she says quietly, is probably the most honest answer you've given tonight. Meghan smiles faintly. And maybe it's the first question that didn't require me to defend myself. A small wave of applause begins. It grows. Soon, the entire audience is clapping. Kelly smiles, and Meghan finally allows herself to relax in the chair. The tension that dominated the interview has not magically disappeared. The difficult questions remain. The disagreements remain. The public debate will continue long after the cameras stop recording. But something has changed. The two women are no longer sitting across from each other like opponents. They are simply two people who had a difficult conversation. Kelly turns toward the camera. Sometimes live television gives us the moments we expect, she says. And sometimes it gives us something much more complicated. Meghan looks toward the audience. The applause continues. The camera slowly pulls back, revealing the entire studio glowing beneath the lights. The interview is ending. But the conversation outside the studio is only beginning. Because tomorrow, every pause will be analyzed. Every expression will be replayed. Every sentence will be discussed. Viewers will decide for themselves whether this was a confrontation, a misunderstanding, or simply two women asking difficult questions in front of millions. And perhaps that is what makes moments like this so powerful. Not because someone wins. Not because someone loses. But because, for a few minutes, the polished television image cracks, and something more human appears underneath. The music rises gently as the final camera shot captures Meghan and Kelly exchanging a brief nod. The lights begin to dim. The audience applauds one last time. And just before the broadcast fades out, Kelly looks toward Meghan and says quietly, "Thank you for staying." Meghan smiles. "Thank you for asking." The screen fades to black. And now, the question belongs to you. What did you think about this intense exchange? Was Kelly right to push Meghan with those difficult questions, or did the conversation go too far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this dramatic story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who would want to watch this conversation. And remember, sometimes the most unforgettable moments happen when nobody knows what is going to be said next.